It's a battle royale in the Queen City. On this episode of Let's Talk Cincy, meet the 6 certified candidates vying for your vote, each wanting to become Cincinnati's next mayor.
From WLWT, this is Let's Talk Cincy, presented by Western and Southern Financial Group. Put our financial strength behind you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Curtis Fuller, and welcome to Let's Talk Cincy. The Cincinnati mayoral primary election is Tuesday, May 4th. The top 2 vote-getters will advance and face each other in November. This system of directly electing a mayor has been in place since 2001. Among the many issues facing the Queen City, crime, transportation, and what some have called a culture of corruption at City Hall, following the criminal indictments of 3 sitting council members. Now, let's meet the candidates. First, Gave Begtrup, a scientist, a business owner, and former policy advisor for U.S. Representative Gabby Giffords. This is his first run for office.
We have a culture of corruption we have not seen in 100 years. And 100 years ago, it took an outsider in Murray Seasongood to clean up City Hall and to get rid of the career politicians that were more interested in their next race than they were in doing the right thing for the city. So for me, as someone who's run businesses, who's brought tens of millions of dollars to the city, created jobs, brought federal grants to the city, and I look at a city that has so much rich history, but isn't prospering the way it needs to. So for me, it was a hard decision, but one where I felt like this is the place I built my businesses, this is the place I raised my kids, and I want a better Cincinnati for them to grow up in. Last year we saw record crime, we saw record homicides, record shootings in the city. And it wasn't the pandemic, it's a trend we've been seeing for years. And personally, I've been affected by gun violence. My boss and mentor, Gabby Giffords, was shot and permanently disabled. And my friend and coworker, Gabe Zimmerman, was killed along with others. And so we are all victims of gun violence. It's not just those who get shot or those who know who get shot. Anyone we lose in our community whose lives are cut short is a loss for our entire society. And we need to reach out into communities and help get people out of poverty by giving them opportunities so they have better things to be doing and break the cycle of violence.
You lived in D.C. for a while.
I did.
Which has a great transportation, a metro system.
Yeah.
What about Cincinnati's transportation? Is that something that you think needs to have some attention?
So here's the amazing thing about Cincinnati. We have such great history on things. I just want us to have a great future too, right? So I'll give you an example. 220 miles of streetcar. That's what we had in the 50s. We led the country in public transportation. Our neighborhoods were connected. They were integrated. So you could go from downtown to Walnut Hills, and you could do that easily. And you could go to work, and you could go to school. And we tore it all up. And we replaced it with highways that brought people from out of town to downtown or through town. And when we did that, we divested from neighborhoods. So when we talk about opportunities, when we talk about building business, when we talk about minority-owned businesses in our city, we need to remember that all of these policies are connected. All over the city, you talk to people, they'll tell you, City Hall is a mess. They actually use more strong words, but City Hall is a mess. The number 3 thing they say is we don't have good public transportation and we don't have a grocery store. Saylor Park doesn't have a grocery store. Saylor Park takes an hour and a half and 2 transfers to get downtown, which means you cannot live in Saylor Park and get access to jobs without a car. We need to be thinking about what Cincinnati is going to be in 2030. I'm a physicist, and so I think about complex systems. I do. I know people are not used to a physicist in City Hall, but maybe we should be, right? Because we have hard problems ahead of us, and we need people who think analytically about them and look at the data and say, I'm not worried about the politics, I'm worried about how we institute good policy.
The next candidate you will hear from is David Mann. He's an attorney and current council member, a former congressman, and he served twice as mayor. His council career began in 1974. Talk about what motivates you to run then and now.
Well, as a young man, I was touched by President Kennedy and his inaugural address. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I was about to go into 4 years of naval service. He was my commander-in-chief, and when he was assassinated, I was horribly impacted by that. And I think then I decided, I'm going to pursue a life of service. I changed my mind about what I would do next, not medical school, but I went to law school. When I came back to Cincinnati, I told the law firm I was joining, I plan to get involved in this community, and I hope you support me. They agreed to. And so here we are a number of years later. I still think there's a purpose to my service, and I'm motivated to do it. And it's what makes me feel that my life counts for something. We have a challenge to bring back trust in the elected officials at City Hall. We have to earn that, and it's going to be hard with all the new folks on council. Only one member of council has been elected before who can run for office. So one way or the other, we're going to have 8 people who have never served or never been elected to council. So we're going to have a real need for leadership and maturity at the top.
Talk about your plans to deal with crime.
Well, it is a bad thing, and the shootings seem separate from other kinds of crime, and I think they've been aggravated by the pandemic, but I think they also are symbolic of the fact that there are young people who don't feel connected, don't feel a path forward, haven't been served by the schools, don't see employment opportunities, and they turn to all those things that lead to shootings. It's a tragedy because of lives lost, and obviously it's a call for the city to do more. Now, we do a lot, but we need to do more.
What about transportation as an issue?
One of the most important things that's happened in this community in the last year has been the decision of voters to move the funding for the transportation system from the earnings tax, from the city only, to the county and the sales tax increase. That is fantastic. It means that more money can be put into the system. The system can better address the problems that you're talking about, not to mention the problems of people not being able to move from where they work to where they live and vice versa. I've had a lot of experience, and I have an idea of what it takes to do things right here to make progress. Mentorship, experience, dealing with the corruption, reducing the avenues for corruption, changing the development process, criminal justice, crime, unemployment, race relations. That's enough to keep us busy for a few months.
Let's talk with 2 more mayoral candidates. Meet Herman Najoli. He's an educator, an author, a soccer, basketball, and track coach, and last year a candidate for Hamilton County Commissioner.
I decided to run for mayor of Cincinnati because of the terrible situation that our city found itself in last year. Last year, this time, I was running for county commissioner as an independent, the first independent to ever make it to the ballot for county commissioner. And coming to the month of November, I was so confident that that was the seat that I would win, but things did not turn out the way we wanted. And so much happened during those last few months of last year at City Hall. And I looked at that, and I just felt this great pressure to step up and run for office. After the U.S. attorney, the FBI lawyer said that there's a culture of corruption, I felt like I'm the right person to come in, a complete outsider of politics, to come in and get the politics out of City Hall so that the experts, the administrators, can do their job. I am an educator, just an ordinary teacher. I feel like I have the right mindset to come in and be an educator for the public and bring in new concepts into City Hall. Just someone who's not an insider, who's completely new with a strong vision, who loves our city. It's very unfortunate to see the rise in crime over the past couple of months, and more so last year during this pandemic. One, we need to get illegal guns off the street. And I think most important, we need to have after-school programs which can provide that kind of early motivation for individuals so that they have purpose in life. I believe that my candidacy is so unique in that it is an inspiring candidacy. When so many of our young men and women all across the city see an individual of my caliber run for office, I think it will be inspiring for people to want to pursue more of their purpose and potential and not get involved in negative vices like crime. So thankfully, so much has been accomplished in terms of just having a police force and crime reduction strategies that are helpful for our community. But over the past 1 year, obviously, we've seen that increase. And I think a lot can be done to really push that down. Regarding policing, I think we are short-sighted when we focus on the actions of police officers as opposed to the direction of the entire policing system. There's a big difference between a police officer and a policing system. Here we are talking about one individual, yet on the other hand, we are talking about a system. And I think the best changes that truly transform the culture of a community and a city are system changes. I have a doctoral degree in organizational leadership. I understand systems theory and organizational leadership. I want to bring that to City Hall.
Our next candidate profile is Rafael Profit. He's a retired Cincinnati Fire District Chief and a retired Lieutenant Colonel from the Army Reserves. He's also co-founder of Public Medical, a group working to transform public safety and community health systems. This is his first run for office.
This is my home. This is where I raised my family. We built a home here in the city, my wife and I. Invested in our children attend public schools. So Cincinnati is my home, and I just want to do what's right for them, and that's why I see that this is an opportunity. For too long, as most of the focus has been on the central business district and the peripheral OTR, and some of those others like FCC, right? These big stadium deals. The focus has been on that sort of development and not the neighborhoods. That's a challenge.
What needs to change at City Hall?
Leadership. That's why I'm running. I saw this as an opportunity to serve the city in which I love, again, to provide the 40 years of public service that I have, and leadership at the highest level in the fire department and the military, that I can provide courageous, creative, and selfless leadership. That's what's needed.
And what would your plan be to address the crime issue?
So, first of all, we have to do the metrics. One of the things is I have a nonprofit called Public Medical, in which we seek to transform public safety, but it's based on the data, the analytics. And so if you think at all of this gun violence, which is very disappointing, disheartening, not only for the people involved, but for our city, is that crime has actually gone down during the pandemic, right? Crime. But when you talk about homicides and gun violence, that spiked up. So what does that mean? What does that really, the evidence really show what's going on here? And I think it's going to require us to really unpeel that, to look at it. Did COVID have anything to do with this? Did a lot of these social determinants of crime, of health, did they have anything to do with it? All of these disparities that have been revealed because of COVID and the social movement, has that have anything to do with the spike in gun violence and homicides? As the next mayor, is that I will make decisions based on evidence.
What neighborhood did you grow up in?
I grew up, I was born in Avondale, spent my formative years in the West End and moved back, and I haven't left Avondale since then.
I asked that because this next question is about transportation.
Right.
And we talk about these 52 neighborhoods. Is that an issue that you hope to tackle?
Well, I'll just say this, that when we talk about transportation, it should be multimodal. It's sort of disappointing that we're in a city such as our size and that we really only have, one mode of public transportation. We have the streetcar, which, unfortunately it just goes round and round from the central business district to OTR and then back again. It's just unfortunate we weren't able to get something to move it uptown into the various locations. So we got to do something with our transportation system. What does that look like? I don't know. I have a background in urban sustainability and resilience. We have to figure out how to ensure that we have a robust public transportation system.
Our next two candidates are current office holders. First, Aftab Purval. He is currently the Hamilton County Clerk of Courts. He's a former federal prosecutor and in-house counsel at Procter & Gamble. Back in 2018, he ran for Congress.
The truth of the matter is, Curtis, we are in a really challenging spot. We're in a critical spot for our city. Unfortunately, it's been a historic year with the pandemic, with the ensuing economic downturn, and then with all of the corruption in City Hall. We need strong leadership right now to come out swinging after COVID, to grow, create jobs, and get back some of what we lost. And when we grow, we have to grow so that everyone, all 52 of our neighborhoods, can share in that success. It's been just such a challenging year. And I know that personally. My wife is a doctor. She works at Bethesda North in Good Sam. She's been treating COVID patients since the beginning of this pandemic. Every morning she kisses our 15-month-old son, Bodie, goodbye and goes to the front lines and treats COVID patients. I'm running for mayor to get the backs of our essential workers who have been the foundation of making sure we make it through this pandemic. And if I'm mayor, if I'm lucky enough to be Cincinnati, so that we can have a brighter future and win the next decade. Transportation is key to moving our economy forward, moving our community forward after COVID. Thankfully, we've made some progress here. The historic bus levy, that was the public transportation levy that was passed last year, made a lot of promises about racial justice, made a lot of promises about equity. If I'm elected mayor, it'll be my job to ensure that those promises are kept. But it's bigger than just our bus system. We have to reimagine public transportation in order to compete in a modern world. Because if we hope to recruit the best and the brightest, diverse young families to come here, but then stay here, we have to have good public transportation, but we also have to think about our roads, not just for buses and cars, but also for pedestrians. Make our communities more walkable, and also for bikes with bike lanes, to keep them safe, but also to keep them inclusive. That's the way forward. We've got to grow as a city. So our number one priority coming out of COVID is to grow. Grow our tax base, grow our communities, grow our skyline. If we grow big enough, we'll have the resources necessary to do the basic services and to accomplish all of the equitable goals that we have. We have an opportunity to change the page on the troubled past with essentially a brand new city council and a brand new mayor. And we've got, and the path forward is clear. We've got to get back to the basics of the charter. We've got to look skeptically at politicians, because we've seen what happens when politicians ignore the rules and ignore the lines. And I'm not just talking about DC, I'm talking about here in Cincinnati. We've got professionals in City Hall whose job it is to do and negotiate and work on these development deals. We need to empower them and trust them. And listen, we're not always going to agree with them, but when we disagree, it has to be public. It has to be transparent. We've got to put an end to these backroom deals.
The final candidate you'll hear from is Cecil Thomas. He currently serves as an Ohio State Senator. He's a former Cincinnati council member, former Human Relations Director, and a retired Cincinnati police officer.
We had a very similar situation going back in 2006. A short time after the civil unrest, we started to see an uptick in violence. And as a result of that, something needed to be done. And this community was screaming, do something, please do something. So we looked at young African-American males between the ages of 14 and 25 back then, because those were the numbers. Dr. Odell Owens did a complete study, being the coroner of the 89 homicides. And he said 86% of those that were victims had no high school education, had dropout, they were dropouts. And he says 74% of those that pulled the trigger were without a high school education. And I would always say to them, look, man, if I can get to where I'm at based on all of that I had to go through living in life. I got a scar right here where I got stabbed in the head fighting down at White Castles at 17, you know. And I said, if I could get to where I am, surely every one of you can. So when you hear that, and you see what's going on, the first thing you want to do is look at how do we get into the educational arena to make sure we're doing everything we can to get these kids educated and moving forward. I was glad to see there's a task force that will now be able to track every gun that's recovered. I'd also like to see a database for the shell casings that are recovered, because every gun leaves its fingerprint once that trigger's pulled. If it's a shell casing that's ejected from the gun.
Transportation.
Moving people about in a very efficient manner is critical to the success of a city and to its growth. You can't have your businesses downtown relying on their employees to get there, and you can't get them there because of the way our transportation system is messed up. One of the things that I think we did good, and I supported it, was to pass the transportation tax levy, which would allow us to move people from outside of the city into the city and vice versa, without people having to drive into the city.
This other issue, everyone has touched on it. What has taken place at City Hall the past year?
I was on council for 8 years. All the negotiating for contracts, and that's the city manager's job. And then bring that back to the mayor and to the members of council, and then he'll brief them on what is the best offer on the table. And then it's up to us to vote on it and say, fine, let's move forward. But to allow that avenue by which a developer can pick up the phone and talk to a member of council, you're getting into some bad situations there, and eventually it'll happen.
We want to hear from you. The email address is ltc@WLWT.com. And remember, you can always watch full episodes or get more information about the show on WLWT.com/Let's Talk Cincy. And if you like podcasts, you can listen to Let's Talk Cincy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. My thanks to all the candidates. Here are just a few important dates to remember. April 5th is the final date you can register to vote in the upcoming primary. Beginning April 6th, early in-person voting at the Hamilton County Board of Elections and absentee voting by mail begins. And finally, the primary, of course, is set for Tuesday, May 4th. Once again, my thanks to all the candidates for participating in today's program. That does it for this edition of Let's Talk Cincy. I'm Curtis Fuller. Thanks for joining me. Have a nice day.